Hey everyone, welcome! Today we're diving straight into a brand new explainer, and honestly, it's a wild ride. We're looking at the origins of modern hacking. When we look at the cybersecurity landscape today, it feels impossibly complex, right? It's this massive web of advanced firewalls and automated threat detection. But to really get how we got here, we gotta look at where we started. And the history, it is surprisingly analog. Let's get right into it.
So where did hacking actually begin? Well, let's challenge a pretty common assumption right out of the gate. If I ask you to picture a hacker right now, I bet your mind jumps to that classic Hollywood cliché. You know the one. A malicious criminal in a dark hoodie, hunched over a laptop in a basement, typing glowing green code and whispering, "I'm in." But as cybersecurity experts point out, real hacking is almost never a spectator sport, and its true origins, they have absolutely zero to do with malicious criminals or dark hoodies.
Section 1. The true meaning of hacking.
Okay, so to find out where this whole concept started, we actually have to travel all the way back to the 1960s. The very first hackers were, believe it or not, just hobbyists. The term itself traces straight back to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, specifically to a model train club. Yeah, model trains. To these MIT students, a hacker was simply someone who figured out how to use technology in a creative or unconventional way. They were pushing the limits of the tech they had just for the sheer fun of it. This was way before the internet as we know it was even a thing. They weren't breaking laws, they were literally just tinkering.
And, well, there was a very practical reason why hacking didn't involve removed digital break-ins back then. In the 60s and 70s, cybersecurity was 100% physical. Computers were not sitting on your lap. They were massive, room-sized machines housed in specific locations, like corporate data centers with raised floors and heavy-duty air conditioning. Back then, security was literally guards, guns, and gates. You had badge readers, physical guard patrols, the whole shebang. Meaning, if you didn't have bodily physical access to the machines locked behind those doors, you simply couldn't hack them.
Now, what is really fascinating is how the cybersecurity community uses these hat colors today to map out the evolution from those innocent hobbyists to modern-day attackers. See, as the term evolved through the 70s and 80s, people started associating it with unauthorized access, so the community split them up into categories. White hats are essentially those original MIT hobbyists. They find limits and vulnerabilities to do good, and then they report them. Black hats, on the other hand, are the ones breaking into systems without permission to do damage or steal. And the gray hats? Well, they sit right in that murky middle, claiming to do good, but often crossing serious legal lines to get there.
Section 2. The Captain Crunch exploit. So let's look at how this builds into the 1970s. This was a pivotal decade because attackers realized a fundamental truth. They no longer needed physical access to that secure, air-conditioned room to manipulate a system. Before the global internet took over in the 90s, the 70s offered a totally different kind of network, the public phone system. This massive, worldwide telecommunications web became the ultimate playground for early hackers. They called themselves phreakers, spelled with a PH. Instead of sneaking past a guard with a gun, a phreaker could literally just sit at a street corner payphone and hack the network remotely.
And it all came down to this one crucial audio frequency, 2600 Hz. Phreakers discovered a massive, glaring vulnerability in how phone companies routed their calls. You see, the phone systems relied on specific audio tones to trigger their internal management control modes. So if you could generate a tone at exactly 2600 Hz and play it into the phone receiver, the system would essentially hand over the keys to the castle. It granted you control, letting you bypass tolls and make long-distance calls globally for completely free.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer ingenuity and, honestly, the absurdity of that era. The phreaker community realized that a cheap plastic toy whistle, which was being given away as a free prize inside boxes of Captain Crunch cereal, happened to blow a tone at exactly 2600 Hz. No way, right? The cereal company had absolutely no idea they were casually distributing a highly effective hacking tool to millions of kids. Phreakers bought up these cereal boxes like crazy just to use a literal child's toy to hijack the global communications grid from payphones. Talk about using technology in an unconventional way.
Section 3. The Internet Wild West.
Now, this ingenuity didn't stop at the phone lines. Moving into the 80s and 90s, the explosion of dial-up modems meant you could call into a computer system and take control, which pushed us straight into absolute digital chaos. Experts who worked in cybersecurity back then often described the early internet as the Wild West. Suddenly, everyone had access to everyone, everywhere in the world. And this unprecedented global connection was incredible for society, sure, but the catch? It was vastly unknown and completely unmonitored. We were just starting to put up basic firewalls, but it wasn't nearly enough. It created a sprawling opportunity for attackers.
To give you an idea of how quickly things escalated, let's look at the Morris worm in 1988. An MIT student figured out a way to plant software on diverse systems across the early internet. But here's the kicker. He programmed this software to self-replicate automatically. This is what we call a worm, and it spread like wildfire. It rapidly infected roughly 10% of the entire internet before anyone could shut it down. This was a massive wake-up call for the world. It was the first time we realized, wow, software itself can spread autonomously and cause widespread harm without a human manually typing at every terminal.
But as technology advanced, and those basic firewalls grew a little more sophisticated, a new realization dawned on infamous hackers like Kevin Mitnick. They realized that manipulating complex computer code wasn't always the easiest path. Actually, manipulating human psychology was way easier. We call this social engineering. Mitnick was notorious for this. He would con people by relying on their natural desire to trust one another, just pretending to be an authorized employee to get the sensitive info he needed to break in. Why hack the firewall when you can just ask someone for the password, right?
Mitnick's manipulation of both people and phone systems did eventually catch up to him, and he served 5 years in prison. But he left us with a pretty chilling realization. He said, some of the really great hackers are ones you've never heard of because they in fact were so good they didn't get caught. And that is spot on. While we study the famous cases, the reality is the most dangerous, highly skilled digital adversaries from that era and even today remain completely invisible to history because their methods left absolutely no trace.
Section 4. The human vulnerability.
So decades of these escalating threats ultimately forced the creation of a modern defensive framework. To defend against this digital Wild West, experts developed what's known as the CIA triad. And note, that does not stand for the Central Intelligence Agency, though, funny enough, their website was famously hacked in 1996. In cybersecurity, CIA stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Literally everything we do in modern cybersecurity is fundamentally about balancing these three pillars. We have to keep data secret, ensure it hasn't been tampered with, and make sure the systems are actually available to authorized users against constant global threats.
Yet, despite all that focus on balancing those technical pillars, the biggest threat we face today often bypasses the computers entirely. Picture this. It's raining outside. You see someone walking toward your office building. Their arms are completely loaded with heavy boxes, and they're clearly struggling. You naturally hold the door open for them, right? It's just common courtesy. But if that person was an attacker, they just socially engineered you into letting them tailgate into a secure facility without a badge. No matter how advanced our firewalls get or how complex our passkeys are, exploiting basic human courtesy can bypass it all.
And attackers have scaled this human vulnerability into a massive digital toolbox. They're constantly adapting. Originally, it was just phishing, deceptive email scams. But today, now we're dealing with voicemail scams called vishing, text message attacks called smishing, and even malicious QR codes known as quishing. They just keep changing the medium to find the cracks in our technology. But the core tactic, that never changes. They are always exploiting that exact same deeply human tendency to trust. Obviously, we don't want a world where we're so jaded that we never trust anyone, but that beautiful human trait is exactly what attackers monetize.
Which brings us to a rather sobering final thought. We've journeyed all the way from innocent model train clubs at MIT to phone freakers blowing toy serial whistles into payphones to the dark, autonomous worms of the early internet. But through all of that technological evolution, one thing hasn't changed. So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. Despite all our incredible modern security technology, are you still the easiest system to hack? Think carefully about the next link you click or the next door you hold open, because humans remain the ultimate vulnerability. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time.